I read a recent article that said, forget everything you know about a Guardians playoff rotation. And so I did, and it was a load off my mind. Then they tried to talk Cleveland pitching, but I didn't know who they were. Shout out to Mitch Hedberg, one of the best to ever do it. You know, I was thinking about the movie, which I just lost you right there, The Dark Knight, Zach. And toward the end of that movie, as the Joker's hanging upside down, Batman having caught him, as he's swinging back and forth upside down, he says, I feel like we're destined to do this forever. Talking about just the rivalry between Batman and the Joker. And I feel like
Heath
for
Ledger?
us... Yeah. Again, another shout out. I feel like we're destined to do this forever with this playoff rotation through the end of the year. Every time you think you got a beat on it, throw everything you knew out the window. And I just, once again, between ineffectiveness in the Dodgers series or even more effectiveness from an old veteran lefty that we're all kind of excited every time he takes the mound now, to injuries and guys deep into seasons they've never been, I feel like every time we sit down 3 days apart, I could have a different answer for who I'd want in that playoff rotation.
And that, TJ, is why I've always said, like, we don't need to have this discussion until the end of September.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. It's always me pushing the gas on this.
Hey, you've got the button, the magic button. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they don't. How important is the rotation? You know what I mean? Like, I think we can overblow it, and I think in some ways we can underrate it. And I'll explain this way. You never want to say, like, you never want to use 2016 as a reference point because
we're going to do it.
But we're going to. They were forced into that, obviously, because of all the injuries. And not even just talking pitching, but, you know, they didn't have Michael Brantley. And they traded, like, Coco Crisp was their left fielder, except for when it mattered most. So I think they had to play the style of baseball they played that got them to Game 7 of the World Series, right? That they knew they had to win 3-1. Go back and look. Like, there weren't 9-7 wins that postseason. And so they had to play that style just as a team. You know, you had to cash in on your timely hits. You had to lean on that bullpen, obviously. And so part of me, like, I think in baseball, just because bullpens, relievers are so much better and bullpens are deeper and starters don't go 3 times through the order anyway, we've de-emphasized the rotation. So in some capacity, I'm like, well, you just need like 2.5 starting pitchers, and this team's got a great bullpen, and they'll be fine. And so I've not pre-trade deadline. I was like, oh man, I don't know if this rotation is. You're going to need McKenzie to come back up and look good, and like we'll see where this goes. And then the rotation happens. It's like, okay, they have a lot of options, and that's when I've just been under the assumption that they'll cobble together the first 3 or 4 innings of every game, and then they'll turn into that bullpen. And what's happened through all of this is that we've wound up at a point where this team is gonna have to play the style that they played in 2016. And so then I'm like, yeah, like this is not great when Gavin Williams looks awesome one start and can't get out of the first inning the next. And it's not great when Alex Cobb wakes up every day with a new injury to a different finger. And so I don't know what it's going to look like in 3 weeks because it's ever changing, as you said. But I think they're going to have to play that 2016 style anyway. And so, well, yes, it's important. Like, if you can get Gavin Williams figured out in 3 weeks, great. If you can have Matthew Boyd continue to pitch like this, great. If Alex Cobb can get healthy and just go 1 month without an injury, great. But also, like, I don't know that that's going to dictate their fate in October because I think they're going to have such a quick hook anyway.
Well, I think you're getting to something I was realizing in this series, too. We're at the point of the calendar and the schedule. Up to now, it was all, okay, what does this mean for the final month? How do you set yourself up? Can you make strategic moves that your roster is optimized, that everybody's in a position for when that stretch run occurs, you're hopefully off to the races. Well, here we are. And yeah, we can still look ahead and say, well, this is what would happen in the playoffs. This, I believe in this. I don't believe in this. We're to a point now where it doesn't really matter. You're not making any big sweeping changes. You're not, more than likely, unless an injury occurs, calling up anybody from the minor leagues. This is the group. This is everybody that you're seeing now. This is the group that's going to take you wherever you get. And so it's almost, I came to like a realization in this series that, and we have said this before, that if the stars show up, the stars show up. If they don't, then your fate is probably sealed. But it's never been more accurate than right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you've made the moves. Manzardo is up. You feel like the roster's a little bit better optimized than where it was at a couple of weeks ago. The starting rotation, yes, there have been many hiccups. There's also been good stretches. They had a turn, they went through the last turn through the rotation where they all look great. Or at least you're really excited about them, outside of maybe Lively. And we can get to him too. I just feel like we're now to a point where it's okay to just examine where they're at and react to the wins and losses in the moment, because this is when it just gets critical. It's no longer about, well, what does this mean 3 weeks from now? You need the wins now, and if the guys show up and perform, that's great, and if they don't, you lost. And there's no changing the formula from here. So you kind of just have to sit back and hold on, and wherever the ride is going to take you, you just have to accept that.
If I would have told you at the start of the week, 1 week ago, that they'd go 3-3 on that road trip to Kansas City and LA, you would have said
it's acceptable.
Okay. So I'm in agreement with you. My thing was, it's acceptable provided they do what they need to do in Chicago. Go sweep the White Sox. And that's what everybody else does. Like, don't you want to get in on the action? All the cool teams are doing it. I think we said this last week when we were trying to figure out, like, okay, the Royals play the Twins, and like, what if you're the Guardians, what do you want out of that series? Well, you got a Royals sweep. So the Twins are like, they're treading water, but like they're kicking really hard under the surface, and they're struggling to keep their heads afloat. And like
3.5 games separates the Tigers and the Mariners too from the Twins,
and you get them for 4 games a week from now in your building. So that could be interesting depending on how we get there in a week, and we can play the scheduled game later if you want. I have not had enough of my NFL primetime music fix yet, but it weirdly, it's just I don't know. Should we do the sports talk radio shtick? Like, are these must-win games against the White Sox? How big is this series? It feels like everything that happened over the last week is fine, provided what you think would happen will happen over the next 3 days. In that, one, you sweep the White Sox, which doesn't, I don't know about you, but like it weirdly feels like it's going to be difficult. And two, the Royals are now at Yankee Stadium, and I don't. Those are two good teams. I don't know what's going to happen. The Royals have set the rotation up, so they've got Singer, Lugo, and Reagans, which is exactly what they'd want to do. Still a tough place to play, but the lead, which is now 2.5 games, you would hope that would increase over the next 3 days. By how much? I don't know. But that would then allow the 3-3 to be acceptable. And really, even before that, you know, they've blown some opportunities over the last few weeks.
I think the 3-3, you have to factor in what the Royals did too, because I would have probably thought that maybe somebody takes 2 out of 3 in that series. But I don't know that I was anticipating a sweep between those two teams. I know a couple of weeks ago I said I had more faith in where the Royals were at, largely because I feel better about their starting pitching. And you know, anytime you got a superstar like Witt playing like a superstar, like an MVP caliber player, and Salvi Perez, there's so much good happening in that team, and I think they're dangerous. We said that entering that series a week ago. That's a dangerous team.
In spring training to 2 Royals people at their spring training site.
Okay,
and
take your victory lap.
They both told me that I was wrong.
Name names.
I have held that over their heads all year. You know one of them.
I mean, it's not wild to think that was a grand vision that felt unobtainable, considering where they were at last year. I mean, give them all the credit in the world for going from where they were at last year to being right in the thick of potentially getting a first-round bye. Not that far removed from it. At this point, only 2.5 games separate Cleveland from Kansas City, and I think they're capable of going into Yankee Stadium and taking 2 out of 3 or more. I mean, their team. We're not here to really talk about the Royals and break them down, but what a weird stretch. Is it? I mean, what they're going through is what every team does this year. For whatever reason, whether it's being just watered down because of injuries, for whatever reason, teams catch fire, they'll look great, you think the momentum is on their side, and then no, you drop a whole week's worth of games. And that should, in any other year, that would knock you really far down, and you would never be able to recover from it because everybody else is dealing with the same things. You have another good week, a good stretch, or a good stretch against the right team, like in this case, the Twins, and here's Kansas City right back into it.
Do you know, and this has been the case in the American League for like 3 months now, this is just how this has gone. Of all the winning teams in the American League, and that's, or even like, I could even throw Tampa in this, they're a game below 500. If we eliminate the Blue Jays, who are in last and they're 8 games under, we eliminate the White Sox, we eliminate Texas, Oakland, and LA, that leaves 10 teams. The top 10 teams in the American League. Do you know the best record of any of those 10 teams in their last 10 games? It's Cleveland at 6-4.
Yeah, get 6-4.
It's been the American League of mediocrity for 3 months now. And so that's why we come on here one week and you're playing club music, and you come on the next and I'm searching YouTube really quick to find funeral music like an amateur. And it's been this way, and it's why I think we always say, like, sometimes you need to escape the Cleveland bubble to see what it's like in other places too, both when it's going well and when it's not. And I think if you're the Royals, you're having that kind of season where it's all new and fresh and unexpected and exciting and different from Cleveland because they lost 106 games last year. This isn't like in Cleveland where they went to the playoffs 2 years ago and had a setback last season and now they're good again. So there's a little bit more expectation. They were supposed to be a 500 team, maybe slightly better or worse. And the Royals people were projecting them to like go, hey, instead of losing 106 games, I think you're only going to lose 89. And that was going to be a success. And they've been phenomenal. They're a scary team to play. I was trying to figure out who Cleveland's worst matchup might be in a postseason series, and they're up there, I think.
Yeah.
Especially with that pitching.
Why were we on the same page? Someone had posted if the playoffs started today, several days ago. It is when the Royals were in that bottom spot. And I looked at it and I thought,
we should play that in the offseason, by the way.
Sure. I thought, where is the reward? I mean, the reward is you get your bye until the DS round. So certainly you take that. But where's the reward? You kind of want to play a bottom feeder. But at this point, I feel like the matchup, the Royals are the more scary team. I don't know, cut the tape for when somehow Cleveland and Minnesota match up and Minnesota takes that series. And TJ said he'd rather play the Twins.
I mean, thanks for reminding me. I got to ask Ken Carmen if he wants to bring on the Yankees again.
It's the playoffs. Anything can happen. Sometimes you feel like it's a great matchup and you get swept, and other times you're scared to death. And the Indians in '97 take down the Orioles, which felt like that wasn't going to happen. So crazy things happen. But it does feel like I would kind of want to avoid the Royals. And at some point, you have to. There's no escaping good teams in the playoffs. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just looking at that matchup. They are a bit scary, even though Cleveland just took 2 out of 3 from them. So credit where it's due. They managed to win that series.
Their lineup definitely has holes, but they also have the second best hitter in the American League. Which, by the way, this week we also get to see. Let's just turn this. Maybe this is Royals podcast day. Witt versus Judge at Yankee Stadium should be fun.
Oh, yeah.
As well. My MVP vote hangs in the balance.
Well, since Judge went on Paw Patrol, apparently he's the worst hitter in baseball.
You know what's funny is the series finale there, they aired the episode after the game. And I think fans could buy like a special ticket package for that day, and you got to watch the episode on the field. And so I'm like writing in the in the press box after, and the Yankee Stadium press box is like open air, and it's so loud there. Everything is so loud, and Paw Patrol is just blaring in everyone's ears. And so the main point here is just like, what a weird scene. But it's ever since then, Aaron Judge has struggled, and maybe there's more of an MVP race here. But then there was a Yankees employee who turned around and said to Hoynesy and me, and was just like, we have an extra workroom in the back if you need it, if you want to get out of here. We're so sorry about this. I was like, I have a 2-year-old. Like, this is
Zach sitting there watching the screen too. He's like, huh? No, we're good.
We have a life-size stuffed Chase in our living room, thanks to Ethan Zuppe.
Yeah, that's right. It's a sad day, but also a great day when you get rid of all the clutter. You really love this at one point, but it's also sitting in the corner of your room collecting dust. So I'm glad someone else gets to enjoy it now.
I do think it's enjoyable to have a race. Remember those years where, and I'm speaking selfishly, I'm sure fans wish the team had a 15-game lead. And hey, if you played the White Sox better earlier in the season, you might. But those seasons like 2018 was miserable. They just got to sleepwalk through the entire regular season and then show up for the playoffs, and they got swept. 2017 was different, I guess, because they had the winning streak. But, even in the 90s, like 95, they won the division by 30 games. You clinch on September 8th, and then what do you do for 3 weeks?
Yeah, but they were such a fun team that it didn't matter. It was just, how are they going to win every single night? It was a different story. But I get what you're saying.
I think it also just... I think they need the competition, because I still think there's a lot to figure out with what their best playoff roster looks like, what their best lineup looks like, what their rotation should be.
I think the lineup is the key thing, because as we talked about several minutes ago, they're not calling anybody up. This is the group. This is probably what you're going to get. And so it's how do you deploy them? And it's looking like Lane Thomas has become the center field option most of the time.
And kudos to him for emerging from the depths of hell.
God. We said it. It was kind of like this 0 for 20 with runners in scoring position, where I'm not even mad about it anymore, because you couldn't even try to go 0 for 20 and actually accomplish that. It's so difficult. How do you maybe. How do you let that happen? Well, it's just you throw your hands up and you say, I don't know. The opportunities were there. With Lane Thomas, he was so bad. It would be frustrating if he was just his normal self, and his normal self was not enough to really make much of a difference. And I still think that's in play. But when he was that bad, it was just like no one could have predicted that. And so for him to just even be remotely playable here recently, thank God, because that was shaping up to be maybe one of the worst deadline acquisitions of all time.
Wait, bad trades? We're talking about bad trades? Anyway, so the Cowboys won 33-17.
No, they're here. People are here to avoid that.
Okay.
Here to avoid that.
Yeah. So
I'm here to avoid that.
To finish my point, though, I think what I'm getting at is the best way to figure out who belongs in your plans is to play games for the next 3 weeks that feel like playoff games. So can this guy get out of this pressure pack situation? Can this guy go through a lineup twice? Can this guy deliver a hit when you need it? I'm not saying Stephen Kwan's obviously going to be in this lineup, but you need him to turn it around and turn it around against good pitching, or turn it around. He's got to hit while feeling some pressure, because that's what October is going to be. So it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see. Their pitching is in such flux. Joey Cantillo starting the season or series opener in Chicago. That was not the plan until the weekend.
How excited do you think he is to see the White Sox?
But that's the thing, is you can't leave your foot off the gas, right?
No, but in his case, he's just been, hey, I'm here. Oh, God, I'm back again. Oh, God, I'm back. He just took punch to the face over and over again, which is these mammoth teams that he's playing, really good teams.
But they have a lot to sort out. You got to figure out where Ben Lively stands. I'm assuming someone's going on the injured list. I don't know if it's Cobb, if it's Lively. for Lively, like I don't, as we record this, like I don't know if there's a specific injury. They haven't said that, but we've talked about like doesn't he just seem like he might be tired? I mean, he's doing more, he's done more this season than he ever has in his career. And he's helped you. We talked about it last week. Like there are some guys who get you to a certain point in the season that aren't going to help you when it matters most. And you need guys like that. I think he's one. I think Scott Barlow helped in certain times early in the season, and that's that. Thank you for your service.
Wow, that really surprised me, though. It did.
Yeah.
I will say it surprised me.
But that leads me to thinking that when this all gets sorted out and they figure out who they're going to have starting these games the next couple weeks, it feels like there's still a spot in the bullpen available for someone who might be able to help them. And don't worry about, can this guy be on the playoff roster? Like if you're in the organization, you can. They have, the way it works is you can replace someone who's on the injured list who has fulfilled their injured list stint. So Shane Bieber can be replaced on a playoff roster, Carlos Carrasco, Sam Hentges, anyone who's on the 15-day IL who isn't coming off the 15-day IL after 15 days. So there's still, if they want, they could add Andrew Walters, give him a couple weeks in the majors, and then let him pitch in the playoffs. If they want to do that with Franco Alamon, they could do that. If they want to do that with Nick Enright, they could do that. They've got options. And so, because it's interesting, it's like, and I do want to say, like, Barlow was helpful at certain points. Like, there was that game in Baltimore where I think was Clase unavailable, and Barlow, like, struck out the side to secure a win against the Orioles. He had his moments. It was a major struggle for him for the last 6 weeks.
It was a weird season. I think that's just going to be the rest of his career. But I understand hanging on while they did. It might have been obvious from a surface level to say he's not getting it done to the level of others. But if you go below the surface, his stuff was still rating really, really well. His command was just bad,
and he doesn't have the arsenal to survive with that lack of command, right? Because if his slider and curveball are the bread and butter, and those were excellent pitches, right? But it's hard to throw those for strikes all the time, consistently.
Well, that's the thing. It's not only that; it's also, I felt like he would get into trouble because he could, even if he got ahead. You know how some guys have the competitive pitches that are just off the edge, that are enticing, they're close enough that the hitter has to offer. I felt like he really failed to ever have those enticing pitches, even when he was ahead in the count, where they would be non-competitive, 0-2 pitch, non-competitive pitch out of the zone that the hitter can instantly spit on. And now you're into more pitches, and he's just waiting for the one mistake. But I feel like, I don't know, obviously we don't know what happens to him now that he's been DFA'd. He would be a guy that I might bet on again next year. Like, I just want to keep coming back to see if the command, does he have the year where the command is good? Because that can happen for pitchers, but it's like you want to bet on the stuff and just see if the rest comes together. I'm not saying make a huge, sign him again for $7, $8, $9 million. I don't think anybody's doing that, but it would be interesting to continue to bet on his stuff to just see, is this the one year where he's lights out? Just because the command in that particular year, the arsenal is working together, the shoulder, the body, everything is working where it needs to be. It'd be an interesting case. I don't know, but I was surprised, and I'm not flabbergasted. It was a little bit of a surprise.
I mean, he'll probably sign with someone for 1 year, $3 million, and that's that. I'll never write this, so I'll just say it here. Super nice guy, by the way, very nice guy, and lived in a van with his wife for a few years, and they would bring it to spring training and just live there. And that's all. I don't even think I ever transcribed the interview, let alone write it, but we'll never see the light of day. I don't know if it would have been a good story. But with him,
told everybody now.
The interesting thing is, or I guess was it a van or an RV? I don't remember.
Van has a different thought in my brain than RV. RV sounds like, this is different than van.
Yeah, because van was Daniel Norris, so now I'm trying to think. I don't remember.
A vehicle of some kind.
We did the interview in
a mobile home.
Okay. He was with the Royals got traded. So with Brian Sweeney for the first half of last year, former Cleveland bullpen coach, now the Royals pitching coach, traded midseason to the Padres. So then Ruben Niebla, longtime Cleveland assistant pitching coach / coordinator / minor league pitching coach. Ruben Niebla took over. He immediately identified some stuff to fix with his delivery, and he had a not great first half with the Royals, had a really good second half with the Padres. So then he comes to Cleveland, and it's like, wait, I already know a lot of what you guys teach because I've had Sweeney, I've had Niebla. Comes to Cleveland, gets Carl Willis and Joe Torres and Brad Goldberg. So he had the full Cleveland instructor gauntlet. And mixed results, not great. I don't know where that goes.
I don't want to make excuses for him because I don't think he'd make them for himself. The organization clearly didn't. But I also wonder if the bullpen wasn't as fantastic as it was, and the rules that everybody has carved out for themselves, if that didn't happen and they had to rely more on Barlow, would just the regular work as opposed to kind of the sporadic, especially here lately, it was not a set role. It was coming in to clean up or when everybody else was down. Would that have made a difference for him too? That's more thinking if I was making any sort of investment in him for 25 and beyond.
So I think if you're looking at how to structure this pitching staff for the playoffs, or let's just say for important games, and we know that you have enough off days in the postseason to really lean on your bullpen. And you have Clase you trust. You have Cade Smith you trust. You trust Hunter Gaddis. I think you trust Tim Herron as much as those guys. He's been really good too. That's 4. I mean, I don't want to compare it to 2016 because Trevor Bauer leaves 3 batters into the game and you have to have your bullpen cover 8+. Like, you hope that doesn't happen. But beyond Tanner Bybee, I'm not sure there's another starting pitcher who you can be like, yeah, he'll go 5 at least. So how many relievers do you need to be confident that they can pitch at least medium leverage? And we named 4. Can Nick Sandlin pitch his way back into good graces? Does Eli Morgan factor into this? Am I forgetting anybody? And then does that make it so that this team has changed its tune and says, you know what? We need to get a little audition here for one of those guys in the minors.
I wouldn't mind it. You're right. One more would really make you feel a lot more confident about playing that style. Because go back to 2016. Let's do that. It's 2016. Who were the 5? Cody Allen, Andrew Miller, Brian Shaw. Those were your big 3.
But that was a great season for. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say Dan Otero was that guy.
McAllister.
Zach McAllister. Would you say he was the 5th?
Manship.
I feel like I'm missing. Manship.
Yeah, joke, but
he did get the win in the Naquin walk-off game.
So that season, I'm just going to read you ERAs because I'm not reading you entire stat lines. Cody Allen was excellent.
Well, that's the best way to gauge a reliever too.
I mean,
let's do that.
Well, I know some writers who will just list wins and losses. You'll think that bullpen stunk. I mean, Miller was Miller. Allen was Allen. Dan Otero that year had a 1.53 ERA.
Yeah.
10 walks in 70 innings is really impressive. Brian Shaw had a 3.24 ERA. McAllister was 3.44. Manship was 3.12. So, I mean, remember they had the 19-inning game and then they had to DFA Jabba Chamberlain the next day? And he had a 2.25 ERA in 20 innings. Like, he had been great. So, yeah, they were 3 deep in terms of, like, elite pitch them in the biggest moments options.
I think,
and then they had 3 more.
As it relates to this year, I think I would like to have one of the starters. It's tough to make this assumption, but let's assume the 5 that we've been talking about here recently are all available. I would like to stick one of those guys in, even if it's Gavin Williams. Imagine Gavin Williams coming in throwing 103 for
if
1
he
inning.
only has to go 1 inning, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, right. Nothing bad could ever happen. And his command was just so awful, and that's the worst team to have that happen against. It would be nice if one of those started. Even Lively, while he's been poor here recently, the numbers don't look good. it's more getting deep into games that has been the issue. Even really the entire season, they've really protected. They don't like him going more than 5-6 innings. They're not going to get him much past the 85 to 90 pitch mark, and that's worked. That's worked. So could he be a guy that's sort of in that role? Not that he's the first guy out of the bullpen. That's not what I'm suggesting, but maybe Cade Smith comes in and cleans up a mess in the fifth, and maybe the previous 2 games you've had to rely heavily on, the back end to give you multiple innings, and then here comes Lively to get you through a bottom part of a lineup, or a inning in 2/3 or something like that to bridge the gap to somebody else.
So the guy I wanted filling that role, or at least I wanted to get a chance to position himself to do that, was Tristan McKenzie. But I think that ship has sailed because it's the second week of September and he's still in the rotation. So I thought it would have been interesting if you could have said, hey, 2 innings max, see what you can do. And that could have been a valuable role for October. So the issue with Lively is I'm always going to have the same hesitations. And it's that, can you get the best hitters out in a big moment when we know your stuff isn't great? And you've done it. You've exceeded my expectations because you've had such good command and you've had great pitch sequencing and probably really good tunneling and everything else that can make a pitcher with average or subpar stuff pitch well. But it feels like that's riskier than someone with better stuff, I guess I would say. But you're right. Like it anecdotally, it feels like while he struggled for the last maybe month, a lot of those starts are, the first 3 innings are fine. And then whether it's just hitters have him figured out at this point in the season, or he's just tired and just doesn't have the command because of it, that second time through the order is a struggle.
Think about he's just needed to be perfect, and not even just in command, but just everything needed to align perfectly because he doesn't have elite stuff. And so late in the year, if it's waning a little bit, then he's a little bit off, and he's not going to get the best results. He's not the guy right now that I would be considering for a start, but I still think there's a role provided he's healthy. You don't really know. I certainly don't know how his arm feels. They're not going to tell us that this late in the year and give away any sort of advantage that they present. But assuming that he's even remotely close to where he's been, I still think it's the sum of the parts. You're going to need him part of it. And
he's a no excuses kind of guy. So you're not going to hear him say he's tired. You're going to hear him say, F that, put me out there. Pedro Avila factor into this in any way? Because that's the other thing is, like, you want a couple guys who can go multiple innings, of course, but you're not carrying a long man to, like, chew up 4 innings if you're getting blown out.
I'm sorry. We're going to do it again, but, God, we are having a conversation about who gets playoff innings, and it features Ben Lively and Pedro Avila.
Yeah.
Tell yourself that back in spring training.
Well, and I think the bigger point here is that's all the reason to get someone with better stuff like a Walters or an Alaman up here, because I keep thinking you're only going to face the best offenses or the best hitters in playoff caliber lineups. You comfortable with Ben Lively at Yankee Stadium facing Judge and Soto back to back? You comfortable?
But why would you do that?
Because Gavin Williams only goes 2 1/3, and you've got to find a way to get through 9. And my point is, when we had this discussion a week ago, when we were debating Williams' ceiling versus like Boyd and Cobb and Lively, my vote of confidence, and I don't know if that's the right phrase to use now, in Williams is that stuff matters in the playoffs. Like, you got to get outs and get outs however you can, but I guess I just feel a little more comfortable with like the potential that Gavin Williams has nasty stuff and can outpower the best hitters, whereas like can Ben Lively or Matthew Boyd out-grit the best hitters? I don't know.
Well,
maybe.
To your point, don't you have the ability in the playoff? Like, you can't do this in the regular season. I mean, they had to go to the bullpen, but do you just you throw them out there, you get them warmed up, ready to go, and then 3 batters in, you know whether this guy's got passable command good command, brutal. Is it that LA start or is it the start prior to that? And you figure that out quickly. I'm not saying that you want to be down 3-0 right off.
That's exactly what happened 2 years ago in Game 5 at Yankee Stadium.
I know. They probably should have had a quicker hook. They probably should have been watching for that a little bit more quickly. But I think if you're trying to make the point, that you want to just because if he's on, which is not crazy to think that he could be because one start prior he absolutely was. If he is on, he's a difference maker. And it's not a if he's on like there's like a 10% chance that this happens and so we'll just have to hope for it. No, I think it's a good chance he could be on, but the spectrum of outcomes is far greater than a healthy Cobb or even a healthy Boyd.
We just spent a half hour talking about setting the pitching staff for the playoffs, and that's not even their biggest issue. They don't score runs. That matters too.
It does. Yeah, 0 for 20 in this series. That second game, I know they're down, 6-0, almost in the blink of an eye. But they come back and they score 2, and they kept having so many chances. I thought for sure they were going to make that a game. And something about it, I wasn't extremely frustrated. I think a lot of it had to do with getting that first game. Once they got that first game, it felt like, I don't want to say playing with house money because you still need the wins. The Royals don't care. They're going to keep coming at you. The Twins, I'm not writing them off yet. You still got head-to-head matchups with them that are definitely going to play a factor here. But something about grabbing that first game just felt like, to me, watching it, a lot of the pressure came off. But it was frustrating into the third game where they still couldn't get a big hit with runners in scoring position. It's like, what baseball gods, what the hell are you doing here? Because at some point, 0 for 20, I'm looking to the heavens for somebody to tell me why it's 0 for 20 in this series.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, we can have this. We could just copy and paste the conversation we just had about the lineup. Like, I don't know what the best 1 through 9 is for this team. I think it's going to look different against a lefty versus a righty for sure, but yeah, I'm still struggling to figure out like who fits where.
Why the running from Noel here the last several days? I was wondering, are you trying to protect him from getting deep into a funk? And like maybe you don't like the quality of at-bats that he's had, so you pump the brakes a little bit so that it never snowballs. But at the same time, a hitter like him, he could go 0 for 17 with 13 Ks, but still then just bomb one that helps you win a weekend series game. I don't like that he has not played as much recently. And this is even with the expectation that he's going to come down to earth some. That I don't expect, no one really expects him to continue to be as good as he has been this year. But at the same time, are you doing it so that Tyler Freeman can play? Or Daniel Schneemann can play? I don't know. I mean, I get Thomas being in there right now because you feel like he's calmed down. The bat is performing like maybe you thought that it should. And he fits into center field in this lineup. So right now I'm cool with that being the center fielder. But I was wondering why the departure from Noel here recently.
Yeah, he started one of the last 5 games. See, my issue is if you want him to avoid a long slump, but you don't know if that's going to transpire until it does. So just pull back when it does. That hasn't happened yet. I don't know. His threatening bat is always going to help safeguard you. Like in those situations where you're 0 for 20 with runners in scoring position all weekend, well, like that's a good bat to have in there because he can pop one at any time. And I think that Stephen Vogt always talks about the pressure valve being released, and that's what he does best. I don't know. That's the thing is like if they're facing, who would they face? The 3-6. So if they're facing like Corbin Burns tomorrow in game 1, what's your 9? And before we do that, do we agree getting Stephen Kwan on track is like maybe the most important thing this team
Sure.
needs to do the next 3 weeks?
Sure. And it doesn't even have to be Stephen Kwan 340 hitter. Stephen Kwan respectable 275 bat at this point I would take. Because having an automatic out at the top of the lineup, I mean, I can see kind of what they're doing. The finale, they gave him the day off. Brennan's the leadoff spot. I mean, I know they recognize it. Everybody recognizes it. Kwan recognizes it. I don't know. But yeah, they're probably, outside of Jose Ramirez, you have to believe that he stays where he's at. Between Kwan and Naylor, if I had to pick one of them to get like on a tear, who would you pick?
I think Kwan. I think you need guys on base. And with Naylor, they're different kinds of tears, I think. Kwan can do a lot of different things as a hitter. Naylor hasn't had a tear where he's, like last year he hit 308. And there wasn't as much power, but there was still some power. And I don't know. His tears are different this year. They're like 3-game bursts. And then he's quiet for a while. I guess it depends what kind of see, even that depends. Depends what kind of tear.
Everything does. I mean, I'll take either or. But I think you're right. Kwan getting on base, being on base for everybody else around him. I feel like it changes the offense to be just more respectable. And just having a leadoff hitter that's making something happen. And I know, when he comes up with runners in scoring position, it's what is it usually? It seems like it's usually with 2 outs, or you've survived the bottom of the lineup, or somebody accidentally got on base prior to him. So it's not necessarily about him doing the damage with guys on base, but when he is up there with runners on base, it would be nice to feel like he's gonna drive somebody in.
I mean, Ramirez and Naylor are both going to have really gaudy RBI totals at the end of the season. That's great. That's a reflection on how much Stephen Kwan was on base at the beginning of the season for the first 4 months. They need that again. Like, let those guys go nuts. Let their eyes get wide as they walk to the plate, because Kwan is on base again, and here's their chance to pad their stats. I think he's the key. I think it makes, especially now that like Lane Thomas can exhale. I think Andres Jimenez can exhale a little bit. He's been better of late, and for better or worse, I think he's going to be in that number 2 spot in the lineup. So I think it just makes everybody feel like they fit, like they're in the right spot. If Kwan is going well, it makes the lineup make sense more, I think. Because I think I'm trying to think, like, we haven't seen Will Brennan. Like, his playing time has waned a little bit, and he just has never. I'm fine letting Lane Thomas play every day if it's at the expense of him, or Freeman, because those guys have just not done enough with their opportunities.
Certainly,
and Lane Thomas has the ceiling and a little bit more of a track record. So I'm trying to play in my head like who should be in that starting lineup, and even against a righty, like it's not ideal. Like Brennan is the better matchup in terms of like what the book would say to do. I would guess, but based on what we've seen,
well, I think the Noel part is what is fascinating to me, because what do you do against a good right-handed pitcher in a playoff? Forget playoff series, playoff game. You threw out Burns game 1. To me, if we're acknowledging that Thomas is going to be in there, so now the question is, would you rather have Will Brennan or John Kenzie Noel in that lineup?
Or Daniel Schneemann. Or Austin Hedges. Hey,
to Schneemann's credit, he went from he was great when he got here, went through a really bad stretch, and has kind of revived himself a little bit to hang around. So credit to him. That is still a guy that I want coming off the bench. That's not someone I'm seeking out starting opportunities for. So you really have to ask yourself, what's the best case scenario for how much Will Brennan impacts a game with his offense? And then you compare that to the likelihood that Noel has a similar There's probably a better chance that Will Brennan's not going to go hitless. But don't you have to play Noel? Because when you're playing a good pitcher, yes, there's more holes to exploit, but what is a Will Brennan single going to do in the midst of Burns striking out 11?
It's like if you took a 2-game sample of each, Brennan's probably going 1 for 4 and 1 for 4, both singles, and Noel's probably going 0 for 4 and 1 for 4 with like 4 strikeouts, but the one's a home run.
Yeah, three-run bomb.
Right, and in a playoff game,
I think you need power. I think you need power in the postseason. I really think you do. Now, if this was an offense where everybody else was getting on base a ton and there was a lot of singles hitters and there was a good chance that you're going to be able to string 3 hits together.
No, then you definitely want Noel because he's going to have guys on base. So it's not going to be a solo shot.
I was trying to paint the picture for the other side. I just don't think I can win myself over. I would want Noel in there.
But also because it's not like he's Bobby Bradley boom or bust. Like it's batting average. His batting average is almost the same as Brendan's, and his on-base percentage is better. Like his strikeout rate is high, but it's not like what he's done so far is impressive. I have nothing bad to say about the guy, and I think he has deserved the opportunity.
I mean, is there anything to? I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm seeking out reasons why you would run away from him. Not even necessarily run away, but not play him as much. Do you think entering the last month that you think if you play him too much, they're going to get a better idea of how to attack him and get him out? So you're almost holding him back a little bit because you don't want there to be more knowledge on how to go after him. But I feel like we're in a point now. Who doesn't know that? Is this the end
of his career? Like, isn't he still going to exist next year and beyond?
Right, but you would be thinking, I want to make sure he's maximized for the rest of this year because if this is the best we ever get out of him, we want to make sure you've given him every reason to assault opposing pitching.
You can't live in fear of everybody becoming the next Oscar Gonzalez.
No, you can't. But in the minor leagues, we're not operating with no insight as to what a hitter is, and they get up here. Who is this guy? We got to throw him fastballs here initially to test him. Oh, let's see. He can hit the fastball. Let's move on to the next pitch. There are scouting reports. People know what to do against this guy. So I don't know that I believe that, but I'm trying to find a reason why you would not play him as much, considering they don't have a lot of guys that can do what he can do.
Yeah, and I think that lineup is more imposing. I mean, if you're a pitcher and you, like for a lot of the year, it was like, oh, just get through Naylor and, I mean, maybe Fry when Fry was going well, and then you'll be okay. And now it's get through Naylor, and then Manzardo, and Noel. And even if they're not the most intimidating hitters right now, they are guys who can capitalize on mistakes and not just with a single the other way. All right, did we solve everything?
It's all solved. Sweep incoming, and we go from there.
Wait, which side?
We'll see you later this week. Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast. Get over there. Let's have some fun. You have some fun in Chicago.
I'm going to go eat a Stan's Donut.